So thanks again, everyone, for taking some time out to attend our talk today. Just a little introduction.
Morning, all. Name is Trent, TeSelle, work for Fannie Mae. Sorry about the voice. I'm really blaming the smoke, but it might have been the beer, but it was really the smoke. So happy to be here. Hope everyone's having a great show, and hope we'll learn something today.
Yeah, me as well. And I've been fortunate to work with some of you all on your journey with VMware's VRA and Puppet Enterprise, and hopefully for those of you who haven't jumped on that yet, we'll have some good value for you this morning. The agenda that we have is essentially to do a primer and an update of what's in vRealize Automations 3.0 and the Puppet plugin for VRA 3.0 to give you that, and a demonstration, a live demonstration, very gutsy on the main stage, of that solution to give you a feel for it. And then I want to turn it over to someone who's really done it for quite a while, hardcore in the field, and Trent's going to take us through what they've got going at Fannie Mae. So it should be really exciting. Can I take a really quick poll, though, while this agenda slide is up? Who is currently using vRealize Automation today? OK, awesome. And keep your hand up if you're using 7.x. OK, how about 7.3? OK, so we've got some folks on the latest and greatest. Cool. We'll try and have some stuff that's applicable to everybody. And who's using Puppet Enterprise today? OK, very good. Cool. So we'll try and show you some of how these things are working together. First off, I'll just start with a reference architecture. So if you want a lab with the solution I'm going to show you today, you can literally set it up in an hour's time. So I'll show you how that process goes, but essentially this is the reference architecture. You've got a Puppet Enterprise installation, and then you've got VRA, VRO. So in modern versions of VRA, VRO is packaged together with it, right? There's an internal VRO instance. So really, it's just kind of two components, setting up VRA and Puppet Enterprise. I break it out like this because the process to get going is install Puppet Enterprise, latest and greatest, for example, anything from our 2016.4 LTS forward, and then go ahead and throw that starter content that I'll show you that we have in GitHub, throw it on there, you're done with the Puppet Enterprise piece. Go over to VRO, download the plugin from the Solutions Exchange, and install it into VRO. Now you're done with VRO. In the past, you had to go and fiddle around inside of VRO. You don't have to do that in the newest integration. And then in VRA, you go and add your Puppet Master as an endpoint, and then start dragging and dropping. And we'll talk more about that. But this is a schematic that I'll use a little bit later and show you a little bit more. I've got the asterisk there. It says, don't look behind this protective shield. Because a lot of times we try and boil the ocean, or we try and bite off a lot. We get a big mandate, and we just automate all the things. At the end of the day, there's an architect out there we'll use as in this example who is just trying to satisfy this desire in his organization or her organization for self-service. They had developers or internal infrastructure people clamoring for the ability to push a button and get a thing, and get it the same every time, and ideally for that thing to always stay in that compliant, secure working configuration. So that's what they wanted, and they had a sense that maybe some of those pieces there on the left, like maybe there was going to be some config management tool like Puppet Enterprise involved. Maybe there'd be something like VRA involved. So they started investigating those pieces and thinking about it. And as they started talking about, well, what could VRA do for me? Well, VRA adds all that governance layer around the provisioning of virtual machines. So at the end of the day, we want to have virtual machines provisioned, but we don't want to have a million different VM templates for all our different server types. We'd prefer to move that into code. But we still need a system to say who can spin up what, when, for how long, on what sort of quality of service, et cetera. So having that governance and that approval process layer, VRA is brilliant for that. And of course, it's great for provisioning VMware VMs as well as other multi-cloud VMs. Let me get within range of my clicker over here. There it goes. Puppet Enterprise, on the other hand, does something a little bit different, right? Puppet Enterprise, you take a desired state that you have for a VM, and it'll take it from wherever it is, from a base VM, just newly provisioned, very vanilla, say Linux or Windows VM, and it'll build everything up, including your security, your compliance rules, including all the operating system settings, if you're configuring middleware, databases, whatever, and make sure that that is done the same way every time. So that seemed like another logical piece to use in this complete system. And of course, the way Puppet works, as many of us here know, is Puppet has this flow of check in to the master, how am I supposed to be configured? Make it so, report. So, and the thing I really want you to focus on is not even the elements on this slide, but the shape, right? VRA is really, really good at doing that initial provisioning. It's kind of like that blue arrow on top. Do a thing, provision a VM, do it the same way every time, complete with all the networking and all the storage, the hard stuff that has to go along with that infrastructure piece. But then you need another tool, Puppet, that circle on the bottom, that makes it so and keeps it that way. Together, it's really an ideal combination. So with that, I'd like to just demonstrate for you what that looks like live here today. Yeah, fingers crossed. So to give you a view of this, what I have on the screen right now is vRealize Automation 7.3. This is back at our lab in Portland. RG Bank is our fictitious company that we use in our demo environment. And you see that I've got exactly what I wanted. I wanted to be able to click a button and get a thing. And so the experience for an end user is literally click a button to request something, and I can see it's composed, this Linux web server is composed of a vSphere Linux VM, and then there's this Puppet logo. Okay, I don't know, yeah, that looks right. Maybe I have to say, you know, this is my test instance or what have you. Maybe there's an approval process in the middle of this. But at the end of the day, I just click submit, and then I've got a request that's cooking in the background. VRA is taking care of all the provisioning, and it will then hand off to Puppet when it's done, and Puppet will complete that process. So from the point of view of an administrator of this system, here's what this looks like. You can see I've got different blueprints in here, and if I'd like to make a new offering, say I'd like to make my new Linux web server or something like that I want to put together, it becomes really, really easy to do so. I get a design canvas. I can go down here and grab a new vSphere VM, throw that on there, and then I get to configure maybe some of the settings of that vSphere VM. But really what I have to do, most importantly, is make sure that once this is configured correctly, that I have Puppet come in and finish it out. So I'll just drag, in 7.3, I can drag and drop a Puppet component right on to this VM. So this is a Puppet enterprise-only integration, and it actually will be doing some things here where we're going to talk back to the Puppet master that we've got as an endpoint. And now we're live querying that Puppet master to see what Puppet environments are available on that master. So I'm going to pick in the production environment. And now within the production environment, we're live querying the master to see what role classes are available. Anybody using roles and profiles pattern out there? Yeah, a lot of folks are jumping on that bandwagon. The idea there is that you have a single Puppet class, a single role, that might have several different profile classes. So you might have, at the end of the day, our Linux web server might have the Linux baseline, and it's got some security agents, and et cetera, et cetera. And that makes up a Linux web server. So I can choose that right here. And then I can even put in a shared token, a shared secret token that I can use for auto-signing against the master. So that's what it looks like to build an offering. And I actually have a couple of offerings that I've built that I've got in the catalog just now. Like this one's really cool. And this was something, again, that previously was kind of a bear to put together, where you've got a multi-node lamp stack like this. I can have a database VM and a web VM, and then I can Puppet handle the individual configurations of those items. And I can even specify a dependency between them. So in this case, the database is going to be brought up first, and then that arrow means that the web tier depends upon it. So we get all that ordering taken care of for us. And on the back end in Puppet, I'm actually doing some exchange of database connection information and things like that. But, and catch me afterwards if you want to see the nitty-gritty details. As far as getting this all set up, so now we see how we get an offering in the catalog, like this lamp stack right here. As far as getting it set up as an administrator, it's pretty easy as well. Once you've loaded the plugin into VRO, you can go right here to VRO configuration and add an endpoint. And you'll see that Puppet will appear right here in the list of endpoints, and you can go through and just enter in the information for your Puppet master. You got a new endpoint. So what we tried to do is just make a very opinionated workflow that works for a lot of our customers. Of course, it's something that's highly configurable, so if you need to do that, that's something that you can definitely do. So just to finish out, to give you a visual of what we were just seeing, at the end of the day, step one of the process is prepare your Puppet roles, right? So if you've already, maybe you've got Puppet practitioners in-house, you could create that role for the Linux web server, Windows web server, SQL servers, whatever you need to have. And there's, of course, over 5,000, over 5,200 modules on the Puppet Forge where you can just grab content and integrate that together. If you want to get started even quicker, grab that starter content that I was talking about that's on GitHub under the Puppet Labs namespace, and it's already got all that Puppet code in there, best practice roles and profiles for you to use. So just look for starter content under the Puppet Labs namespace, and you'll find it easily. Then you saw how easy it is to make a blueprint that uses that Puppet code. So you can have your Puppet practitioner prepare it, have your VRA admin make a blueprint that points at it, and then your consumers can just click a button and get that same result every time. And the thing is, it's not that single arrow, right? It's that we could have done this with PowerShell. I could have done this with Bash. Well, yeah, then you would have had that single arrow. But you want something that keeps it continuously compliant. So that's where Puppet Enterprise comes in. That Puppet agent will check in every 30 minutes by default, tell you about its state, figure out what state it should be in, and report back on any changes necessary, right? And you get that continuous loop going. So anyway, that's the basis of this integration. That's a quick demo of the plugin. And now I'm going to hand it over to Trent, who's going to talk to us about how to get real with this stuff. But he's been doing this for quite a while. Trent, take it away.
All right. Thank you. What's my range on this?
I don't know. Try it out. There you go.
Find out. All right. I'm going to start off just a little history of Fannie Mae Rapid IT. Yeah, Rapid IT is our internal branding. We want a nice name for it. You know, it's for our automated delivery of IT infrastructure and management of infrastructure out there. It's part of a larger dev services convert Fannie Mae to DevOps project. You can't do DevOps without automation, so we're automating the world out there. Like I said, vRealize Automation and Puppet Enterprise are tools that we chose to implement this with. Puppet Enterprise for everything it does really well, to ongoing configuration management of servers, software installs, database and middleware configurations as well going on via Puppet. We use the vRealize Orchestrator to pass information to Puppet and integrate with all of the disparate Fannie Mae, big corporations have a lot of old systems that you have to integrate with. And VRO is really good at reaching out. And so IPAM, DNS, all of those is where we use VRO a lot. And then via Orchestrator lets us orchestrate Puppet too. Because when we started this, there was no Puppet orchestration. You had to put all of that in Puppet code. And we weren't very good at Puppet code yet. We didn't want to put it in Puppet code. So the Orchestrator let us do things at the time that plans and tasks seem to do now in there. So we're going to actually go back and look at how that works in our world. Just a few of the features. IaaS catalog with day 2 actions for a lot of the legacy type apps and servers. Self-service application blueprints, that's what I'm going to walk through here in a bit. And then XAS workflows. We use lots of workflows for just day 2 actions for teams. Our own support group for vRealize, we basically, we let L1 do things that you would never let them want to do in vRealize because they could destroy it, but we give them a simple workflow that can do it so they can't screw it up. And also we do operations workflow for other platform teams as well in there. So here's just a quick component diagram with, vRealize, the big blue box up there, where the consumers request and the governance and approvals that come with vRealize is there. And the subcomponents of that with the vRealize application services blueprints and the VRO orchestrator. And like I said, the orchestrator is how we talk to the shared services, the IPAMs of the world and all that, the monitoring systems. We pass configuration data to Puppet, whether it be to the console, to a NAS drive, to Hyra, fax, whatever, from Orchestrator to Puppet. And then we also can run Puppet things in specific orders too out there with the orchestration if we need to. We try not to, but we do. vRealize spins the machines, gets them on the network, then Puppet comes in and does the local enrichment on the machines of everything that needs to be done and that ongoing state management once it's been spun up in there as well. And like I said, all the R10K for the Puppet code, I'm sure lots of people, pretty normal on that. So we needed a way to get configuration over to the Puppet masters, the same set for any node. And back then, the choice with Hyra is you put it in Git, you commit it, and go up. We weren't ready for that. Telling an ops team that they had to go use Git to do operational changes and things, no, we didn't want, that was a no-go. So we had to come up with a little different way to make it easier to pass more dynamic data in that lets the self-service person give that data to Puppet. So this was our little pattern we came up with where we have a NAS drive out there, and that is mounted across all of our Puppet masters. VRO write JSON data over to that NAS drive. And then if need be, we'll have the standard role for a server, but someone might be doing enrichments which is not part of the role. We can also do additional classification to add that specific configuration this app needs who might not have a role for their app in the system yet. So, looks familiar? We're still on 7.2, so we don't have the new coolness here. This is the older version of the plugin where you're setting the role for a server. It's kind of hard-coded in our template blueprints, but we really have just 5 or 6 standard template blueprints. We have web server, a couple different app servers, an Oracle server, a couple Windows servers. So we don't have a lot of blueprint sprawl for that. So in this example here, got just 2 role-based IaaS servers, got a Apache web server and an app server TC server. So those are the building blocks. So the person starting to do this is actually the development team. That's kind of the key thing here. We manage all of what we call the Legos, which are the standard configurations, but then entitle teams to build their custom blueprints out of those standard parts. So this would be a developer or an application architect coming in here and building their environment themselves, with what they want on it. So they come in, they start doing some application-specific enrichment. For this one, I've dropped in an XAS workflow, which is a create an application file system with that. So behind the scenes is a workflow that does everything needed to create a file system. Think, well, what's that? Create a file system is easy. Well, no. This actually goes to the vCenter, dynamically adds storage to the VM for the size of the file system. The days of, I'll just allocate 500 gigs to a server and leave it there and just use it up. No, we dynamically add the space that the person requests is how that works. You're not allowed to get empty space on a server. That space is for a specific use. That's when we add it in there. Other things in there, it goes and sets up the monitoring. It shuts off DRS while we do this because we don't want the server moving around. That breaks the workflow. And just lots of error handling, because the exact same workflow is actually used as a day 2 action on existing servers where people can come and add file systems to them. That's kind of the beauty of the VRO here. The one workflow with the slightly different wrapper can be a blueprint or it can be a day 2 action later. Someone decides they need to change some infrastructure, add to it. So Part of VRO is you can use, what are kind of smart forms. The inputs to the workflow are automatically become input forms for the users. And you can set all the restrictions on those forms or even actions to run against entry to validate at that point. So in our form, our kind of mantra is the user should never be able to enter anything that causes a failure. So the form has to stop them from breaking things. They can still be stupid and get the wrong stuff, but they'll always get a success. At least that's what we try for. So even the name of the file system, it's checked against standard naming patterns. The mount points are a pre-drop-down list of the allowed mount points for app file systems. The user ID, the owner, and the group, we actually, we validate that against Unix in the form. So they can't submit, if they don't have a valid form, because we don't want Puppet choking later on this box because, oh, this Unix user doesn't exist in there. So on the right, and the one key thing is this workflow is running post-provision in here. So the servers are spun up, and then these workflows kick off on the blueprint, where on the right is actually the JSON data that is generated from this workflow to create this file system. That's the data Puppet's reading right there. This is a little old. This was how we did it quite a while back. Or actually, some of our older modules still are using a file reference to get this. I think actually they were upgrading to Hyra 5 this week, and this was going to convert over to a, the new way of this is a location for this module kind of Hyra data. So it'll simplify us there a little bit on that. So app developer keeps building all their workflows and what they need to be the Oracle client, an app domain for their app, a web server in there. All the arrows are dependency orders, so it's built in the specific order because what's really cool, this is why we love the blueprinting concept is this is a one-to-N servers at this point. You don't know how many servers they're going to request. We've defined the structure in the blueprint, but in development, this could be one web server, one TC server. For prod, this could be 1 in 8. But the beauty is the way the property bindings in Blueprint works, it passes that array of servers to those workflows. So in the end, 8 nodes just got that configuration added to them, and it can be dynamic based on how many to do. And they've recently added scale out. So if they scale this out, these same workflows would go and add those servers with the same public config as well in there. And the other piece that's really cool is the dependency of the Apache to the TC server. So you enter all this information in the required data for your TC server app domain. The module for Apache, well, instead of making the module be super smart and be able to go and get the data from that one, it's like, oh, the workflow here, just we bind to the properties you set there. And the dynamic, so it works out really slick. So you don't know what your server names are, you don't know IP addresses, but this is going to actually configure your load balancer when it does it all at one time here. So you're getting these fully enriched application environments, functional, with a single request. Now, this is my geek out moment. vRealize, you can export all these blueprints as YAML. So we actually have it set up where every time someone saves a blueprint, it's automatically getting committed in Git. So it gives us that historical path just because vRealize doesn't have the best, current version does not have the best role-based access for who can edit other people's blueprints. So this gave us that way of if someone came in and accidentally edited someone else's blueprint, we've got them all. Every time someone hits save, we can actually go and pull those back in over there. And we've added some other workflows about tagging and publishing tagged versions of workflows as well with that. So here's the request of that blueprint, like Jeremy says. You see the multiple servers, and it shows you all the various workflows that are going to run within this request. When you're defining those workflows on the blueprint, you have a choice. You can either make that like a hard-coded value, which is going to be the same for every environment, so the user can see it here but can't change it, or depending on how you enter the data, they can be edited values. So like for the file system, for dev, 5 gigs is enough. But for prod, you want a 100 gig file system. So the requester for prod, who is spinning this up for prod, or the CI/CD system, or whatever is kicking off this deploy of this infrastructure, that's just a variable of the size of the file system they could pass into the request. But you get the same structure, but you can size it accordingly and not have to worry about things being different as far as for an app working. So that's where the blueprints have really, really paid off to ensure all that's there. So, kind of wrap this up. Leveraging both of these tools, allowed us, to get value quickly. So we could actually have, we had no roles when we started. We actually implemented, we were replacing an old Blade Logic automation system. We were integrated with Blade Logic and Puppet at the same time. We're like, okay, this thing is a Blade Logic thing still. Okay, when that's done, now go Puppet, go do this next piece. And over about 6 months, we removed all the Blade Logic, brought it all into Puppet for the machine now, which is much better in there. So it let us get value really quickly while we were transitioning into Puppet. Like I said, it provided immediate value for Puppet before we were ready for Puppet. Getting certain teams to think in that Puppet way of actually checking in their configurations, and that is sometimes hard. So this gave us a way where people can control their data themselves, but Puppet is going to maintain whatever they ask for, they're going to get with it out there as well. And like I said, VRO allowed us to do some things with Puppet that it kind of hard by itself at the time, where for that, like the file system one, I had to go out and I have to remote in, to the monitoring file system, the monitoring system, that I create this file system, here's the monitoring, what needs to happen on this. Yes, you can do that with Puppet, but you can. We didn't have to do that kind of stuff with Puppet up front, because VRO does that kind of thing really, really well on that. And it also lets us manage now these servers beyond a standard server role. So the standard roles are very kind of generic, all the agents and policies that they must have, and app teams can come in and enhance and enrich those for their application. And kind of why that's important is, we have 600 apps. Those app teams don't have the Puppet skills to go and build their own roles yet in there. But their part of that is, if they do, they can. We're not stopping anyone. If a team wants to go 100% Puppet and not use the blueprinting, we encourage them to do that. And what we'll do when that happens, we publish that up as a base role server at that time, and that's where we can use Jeremy's new stuff when we upgrade. So those teams can leverage the plugin of, this is the role I want on my server, and the ones who don't have a role yet can still leverage they can enrich it however they want in there and have that blueprint as code still checked into Git, so they can recreate environments over and over within there. And then, like I said, we did a very data-driven design model where, the Puppet module, it's all data-driven. So it's very easy to get various configurations on boxes that you need. And even the file system one, I can drop 20 file systems in, as long as they have a different name and a different mount point, awesome. So, you can add more and more nodes out there to that data, and the Puppet code is just like, oh, create this, create that, and lets people get really, creative in what they need to do on things. So that's about that.
Yeah, and I think, Trent, one of the messages for folks maybe to take away is, this is not something that you all did with the snap of your fingers or overnight, right?
No.
So you can get started with something relatively simple.
Yep.
Just have some Puppet roles that you apply to some VMware infrastructure, and you can make that happen now today with the plugin. And as you realize that you need something more complex, something a little bit more tailored, you can tack that on, right? Because you've got that extensibility, and you can see how far you can go. To me, it's kind of unprecedented. I hear about organizations who've got really nice request workflows where people can select all sorts of things, but he's letting his developers literally create the blueprints, right? That is like another level, right? Literally. So you can start out with just using an integration like we have today, then move up the stack to customizing it, and then maybe even get to that nirvana where Trent's at.
Yeah. And our nirvana is actually trying to roll back to your world, if I can, for certain apps who really want to embrace Puppet and define roles in a more traditional way. because it actually makes the blueprint even simpler for those teams. So
You're kind of coming full circle. You're trying to come back and simplify again.
Exactly. We gave them a way to get what they need now, but if a team really is good at Puppet and wants to build their servers exactly as they want via roles in the true Puppety way, I'd love to, because then I can leverage how the plugin works natively, and it actually makes it simpler because we have less things that can go wrong. You drop a lot in the blueprint, you do have failures sometimes, but so like I said, full circle. But the best is we're going to offer both options.
Right.
So it lets the dev teams get infrastructure, functional infrastructure, day zero. That is our goal. And just speed things up. The whole move faster.
And kind of meeting your customers where they're at.
Yes, exactly.
Cool. I know we've got about 13 minutes. We can do a couple things. We can take questions, especially for Trent, and if needed, I'm sure I can even get them to switch the monitor back, and we can even show you a little bit more of things under the covers if that's interesting to folks. But maybe first for some questions.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm curious if using classification in the Puppet Enterprise console is required here. It looked like that was a required field to select a role, and I do everything out of Hira. I don't really like classification in the console, so I was wondering, is that a requirement? Can I avoid putting any classification in the console with this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know, can we switch back to the computer input for a second? Awesome. So let me show you how I have this actually set up. The way that this integration works, again, we were super opinionated about it. We figured people will go get some modules together and get the plugin going. Maybe they'll use our content that we have here. So all this content, right, the idea was to go standard roles and profiles approach. And so if you've got a role like your Linux web server, then it's literally it's a role class made up of a bunch of profile classes. And those are the things that actually implement everything. But what we tried to do is say, like, hey, could I just point at a single thing, at this role, and be done? And you can, right? So we said, well, where are we going to put that role? How are we going to do the classification? So what we're actually doing, here we are in Puppet Enterprise. Let me reload, make sure I'm still logged in. And Trent was amazed. I told him I upgraded to 2017.3, the latest release, like just this morning, because this was a .2 server. It went fine.
Living on the edge.
Totally good. We're up. So if we look at, like, here's one of the nodes that I provisioned this morning, this 1272 out of VRA. The way that we ended up doing it, let me go down first to the trusted facts here. So the way we did it is we actually, in the integration, we send in whatever role you choose, we send it through as a trusted fact of the pp_role, and we also note the environment that you chose and actually the VM UUID in VMware. And then we can use that later to track that thing down in PuppetDB when we do decommissioning, so that we release the license and the cert and all that. So this is how we do it in this integration. We've had other people do it with just a regular fact, not a trusted fact. Had other people write to Hira, or like Trent's.
We actually talk to the console and say, add this host to that existing node group on the console.
Right.
Is what we're doing from VRO.
And then putting some of the parameter data into that NAS drive, that JSON.
So exactly. Write the NAS, write out the Hira data onto that NAS drive dynamically, and then go do the. If there's a classification needed beyond the base role of the server, we'll go add additional classifications, and then they'll run and pick up and add the additional enrichment in there.
Yeah, the other thing that we added in here is, with the plugin integration, we also create a fact here called Puppet VRA properties that gets shipped to the node. And in that way, all the stuff about the blueprint, we redact any of the secrets, but all of the stuff comes through. That way, if you wanted to, and this is, again, a very simple way to get started, you can put a custom property like, which web server port to run on, what Java heap size, what this, what that. You can send those settings through as standard properties on your VRA blueprint, and they show up in this list of facts, which means you can access them in your Puppet manifests or use them for whatever.
Yes.
Great question, thank you. Does that help?
Yeah,
Okay.
we send facts, we talk NAS data, we've even updated some data in the node group previously. We've stopped doing that because, you know, it was one of those, hey, we can do this real quick and make some progress, and we knew we were going to re-engineer it later, and that, you know, we moved actually back over to the NAS is what we did at that point. So infinitely, the good and the bad. You can pretty much do everything you want, or, you know, with this. There's a lot of choices, and you know, some trial and error, but you can, you know, you start to recognize what works best for different situations, and you get down to this basic set of patterns, and it's like, okay, oh, that's this, that's that, and now we can just keep going over and over.
Exactly. Yeah, we have a question. I see one back there. Yeah, this is for folks that end up pulling down the starter content. This is what the Windows website looks like, and the Linux website looks very similar. They actually use the same index.html template, but slightly different code for IIS or Apache. So,
I just got a question for the VM templates. Does the Puppet plugin inject the agent, or do I have to somehow prepare my images in front of using them?
right, no, we do. We inject the agent. We install the agent as part of the workflows. So the way it worked in previous versions, if you were in 6.x, you would use the lifecycle stubs to say, you know, at the machine provision stub, run a VRO workflow. If you're in 7.x prior to 7.3, you had the event broker. So you could set up an event broker subscription, and at, say, machine provision stage, you could point to the Puppet Enterprise install workflow. Or in the new integration, VMware's component with the Puppet component handles all of that timing for you. And it does. It reaches out to our plugin, which has a workflow that installs the Puppet agent, gives it that role that you've specified, and then it will run Puppet on that agent until it's green. So it'll run Puppet till done. So really, in just like one motion, it all just comes up. Another question there.
Is there any way to get it running with Puppet open source?
So with open source, what we're using, so you could certainly make something work with open source, right?
Ours would. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, really, there's nothing in what we built that requires, you know, Puppet. You
Right.
know, so at least, you know, ours is, you can pass data to Puppet. Open source would actually work just fine. Couldn't use the console as much, you know, but we'd have to, the NAS data pattern would probably still work fine in ours.
Yeah.
Yours is, I know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you can definitely build this, and you know, with folks that have tons of experience and who've, you know, built this sort of thing up on their own, that's great. For people that want to get started quickly, we wanted to have a very opinionated solution, and really, frankly, to make it so that we could build it, support it, and iterate on it, we need a set of APIs around, you know, provisioning new Puppet nodes, you know, decommissioning Puppet nodes, other kind of this kind of trusted facts infrastructure, et cetera. We're using certain APIs and affordances that are in Puppet Enterprise that just made it so much easier for us to do this. And so that's why we went that way. And we found that a lot of our customers who were doing this were already looking to Enterprise anyway for that easier button. Not easy, but easier.
Hi there. How do you handle the naming of the hosts? Do you, yeah, how do you handle the naming of the hosts?
Yeah. He knows how to really do it. Mine is just like a prefix.
The out of the box in vRealize, you set a prefix and it just counts numbers up. But on ours, we don't do that.
My prefix is that.
We take a certain set of properties for a host. Target environment, type of host, the app code, which is a CMDB artifact, Linux, Windows, and we have this pattern we name dynamically. So we have a VRO workflow that runs it using the event broker during pre-requested, which we have all those custom properties available, which then assembles that host name, and there's an increment counter at the end that just keeps going up. And as part of that, it creates the name, does a quick DNS validation. Does this name exist in DNS? Yes or no? No, great, we're a safe name. And then we pass that name back to vRealize. So when it goes, there's a property you add back called hostname to the entity. When it spins the machine, the vCenter automatically names it that in there. So
you clone a template?
Yeah, we have actually a single vSphere template for each OS. And then, like I said, if it's an Oracle server or a Apache server, it's the same template.
And you utilize Event Broker to check that host name?
Exactly. We use Event Broker with building machine for all the pre-IPAM stuff, and then machine provision to tell Puppet, oh, by the way, turn this generic machine into an Oracle server, or turn this generic server into an Apache server.
And the stage during the Event Broker is the build install?
We use pre-requested, pre-building machine, pre-machine provisioned are the main ones we use for the stages, like host name stuff at pre-requested, all the IPAM, go get the IP address, add it to DNS before cloning, then clone happens, and then during pre-machine provisioned is when we sell Puppet, go do all the enrichment. And then since we're using the blueprint, those extra ones are actually executed automatically after the machine is provisioned at that point in there.
Thank you.
Yes.
Very impressive.
Yeah, and to be clear, right, we actually, the stage where we're doing this work is at that the machine provision pre is where we're actually doing the work as well. So if you want to slot into those earlier stages and layer on a little bit of event broker, if you want to throw an event broker subscription and use it together, you can certainly do that. So you can just add a new one in here and, and then make some of those custom actions like hitting IPAM, et cetera, happen.
Exactly. But that's one piece where the blueprint's nice. People can add in these custom workflows and you don't have to set them up as events. The blueprint mechanism is kind of triggering those later, as kind of post-provision in the defined order that the user defines. So it really makes it really handy.
Hi, I actually have a few questions. First thing, I guess it looked like success deployments at Fannie Mae. I wonder if you can share some of the sizing in terms of what's the size of the footprint, what's the improvement in velocity of delivery.
Oh, so how many machines?
Yeah.
Right now we have like 2,500 machines currently actively managed via vRaw and Puppet. About to expand that immensely by rolling out Puppet to all the brownfield hosts out there. Thanks, Larry. On that. And before we started, it would take an app team 12 weeks to get servers set up with all the stuff they want. Right now, we're not 100% coverage yet. There are some internal shared services that don't have APIs. Thanks, guys. But they're replacing those with some new tools. And we're constantly integrating with additional ones. I would say to get from where they're at today, spin up this environment where it is, maybe one more week of a little manual work of submitting tickets to do that last setup in there. So we've gone from 12 weeks to 1 week. I want to get it down to 2 hours, so it's everything's end to end, because we do plan on integrating this into the CI/CD pipeline, where we want Jenkins to deploy this infrastructure and then deploy the code and let the code, well, we want Puppet then to deploy the code into that infrastructure.
Maybe Puppet
as well. That's our
pipeline.
plan on that. So, it's, we've shortened that. Yeah, we're still getting there. There's always more things to automate, but it is a challenge at times.
Cool. And
that sounds great. I guess the second question is related to, you kind of alluded to, you have 600 apps to support overall. I'm in similar boat. My team supports roughly 2,000 apps on paper, but what's actively is more like close to 1,000 apps. And different app owners, like you alluded to as well, has different maturity level as well as their priorities. Some of them already went down the path with different tool chain. They may managed by, I guess, day 2 activities managed by Chef, Ansible, etc. So I guess I want to pick your brain how you manage, how to manage or enable multi-tenancy from technical stack perspective. How do you organize versioning, higher data, and public code, and through repo, etc., to enable true multi-tenancy. And secondly is on day 2 or day 100, how to manage the potential conflicts with the different tool chain, those different app owners already marched down the path.
Yeah. Well,
thank you.
What we did, we automated target state. You know, if an app was on old technology, a legacy app, they don't get an automation. We're trying to create that easy button path to encourage people to move to target state. So when I say 600 apps, that's 600 like apps in production right now. The vast majorities, they've been running on servers for years. They're sitting out there in place. We don't touch those. Like I said, we're just pushing the Puppet agent out to those servers. Are we going to put those servers under active management? No, because they were built over the various years under different requirements and specs at the time. We have no idea what, you know, we might run some no-op on them just to see what would it change, just out of curiosity, but we really don't plan on bringing those into the fold. But when that app has a requirement that this is end of life, you must upgrade, well, guess what? Here you go, guys. Go build your new blueprint. You know, get your new environment that is under management now. So it's kind of that, greenfield, brownfield, where they're still kind of stuck in the old ticketing world. Submit your tickets, get your work done. You know, and here's the carrot, guys. If you do this to your app, you're now in the fast lane. So, our goal is not to support them. We're just trying to tempt them over and, get everyone into the fast lane, because that just helps everyone at that point.
I guess the previous 2 years were in similar boat. Then this year we're consolidating data centers. One of the major ones in the process being closed. All the workloads, all the app owners start to migrate. So we're not as lucky state to leave them alone. We are forced to provision servers and have the base provisioned into a prescribed state. The challenge is managing day 2 and day 100. Mm-hmm. One thing curious about the VMware template is you mentioned, I think to answer that Jimin's question, you mentioned you only have one template per OS version.
Yes.
If we pretend to be real, let's say 7.4 at this point, do you have one for 7.4, 7.3?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So basically, when we get a new OS, we create a new template, give them a new catalog item for the. I know there's new profiles around templates in the new 7.3. We're not using that. Where at that point, you could have one blueprint and let the user pick the template in there. I've played with it, but we haven't upgraded to 7.3 yet.
So I guess Puppet will try to do OS update right after?
No. What it is, we'll get the new template. There's a patching process if it's an old server, but when the new templates are available, we go in and update our blueprints, so people are always getting the latest OS in there on it as quickly as we can.
And I know we're out of time. We really got to break now, but we'll be in the back if folks have some further questions, and happy to hang out a little bit. So thank you so much for coming.
Yep.